Whilst the most famous Chaos champions are veterans of the Horus Heresy and the Long War, some come from the modern era. Today, we look at one such individual, a chapter master turned pirate raider who operates from deep within the Maelstrom, leading what remains of his chapter along with other renegades who have sworn themselves to his cause. His secession from the Imperium triggered a brutal and costly civil war that involved no less than 17 different Astartes chapters and 3 Imperial battle fleets. His former home now lies in Imperial hands once more, and it is there that we have come to today. Welcome to Badab Primaris, former home of the Astral Claws chapter that has since become known as the Red Corsairs. They were led by chapter master Huron, the self-styled Tyrant of Badab, now known as Huron Blackheart. My name is Michael for Tactica, Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The Astral Claws were a chapter founded in M35 as part of what is believed to be the 10th founding, although it is not confirmed. They were formed as a crusading chapter, a chapter without a home world that are entirely fleet-based. Other examples of crusading chapters would be the Black Templars, the Blood Ravens, and the Minotaurs, as well as the Imperial Fists. They were founded to combat the Nova Terra Interregnum during the same period, a 900-year war fought over Segmentum Pacificus after the ecclesiarchy screwed up in trying to unite the Imperium as a religious state. It created another Mechanicus schism and was probably the biggest civil war other than the Horus Heresy or Age of Apostasy. Annoyingly, given that I wanted to visit their founding legion next, we don't have a way to trace their primogenitor chapter, though it is suspected that they are either descendants of the Dark Angels or Ultramarines, based on their doctrine and gene seed stability. Their gene seed was also used to create 3 new chapters, though we only know the name of one, the Tiger Claws, supposedly founded in M36 but who disappeared in the warp for centuries, then seemingly went extinct after a rebuilding request made personally to the High Lords of Terror was denied. After distinguishing themselves during the 5th Black Crusade, a brutal conflict that saw 2 full Astartes chapters wiped out and the Demon Prince Doombreed imprisoned by the sacrifice of a Blood Angel's vessel, the Astral Claws were stationed with a homeworld in Segmentum Obscurus, and then supposedly wiped out in M38, only to pop up again as a fleet-based chapter in M39. Their leaders and heroes during these engagements are sadly unknown. In fact, we know nothing of any Astral Claws until mid-M41, when Huron became chapter master. At this time, the Astral Claws were part of the Maelstrom Warders, a group of chapters who guarded the systems around the Maelstrom, which is a warp storm / portal second only to the Eye of Terror in scale and power. Now, what I'm about to tell you is actually supposed to have been destroyed by the Inquisition, but is all held off the record by the older hereticus, so thank them for being so dumb as to give me a chance to learn this so I could tell you. About 20 years after Huron became chapter master of the Astral Claws, a rebellion took place on the world of Badab Primaris, second world geographically in the Badab system, but capital of the entire sector that encompassed at least 3 other star systems. The Astral Claws used Badab Primaris as a recruiting world, but let the coup play out and eventually be put down. Either that, or they were on campaign / patrol the entire time, since they were still fleet-based. In response, Huron wasn't content to leave the world to it, seizing power over Badab Primaris and appointing himself as planetary governor in order to better protect the populace. He then claimed dominion over the entire sector on the same grounds, and gave himself the moniker of Tyrant of Badab, making the Badab sector something of a mini Ultramar. The precedent of the Sons of Guilliman among others to rule the sector was probably why there was no response from the Imperium at this time. Over the next 30 years, Huron would begin to withhold the gene seed tithes expected of his chapter, along with pretty much every other resource available to him. For those who don't know, the Adeptus Mechanicus demand 5% of every chapter's gene seed to test for deficiencies, monitor the chapter's health, and create stockpiles for the founding of new chapters in future if the gene seed is viable. And so this refusal from the Astral Claws was probably a big deal after a while. It wasn't uncommon for chapters to be late for one reason or another, but the Astral Claws were at it for decades. It was long unknown why this happened, but it has since come to light that Huron had requested to lead a crusade to secure the entire Maelstrom area, but had been denied by the High Lords of Terror, and so had set about raising the forces himself. No one seemed to mind for the longest time, assumedly because the middlemen who collected the Astral Claws tithes were still paying up, and or the Mechanicus didn't ask for gene seed very often. But after 180 years or so from Huron's power grab, the Imperium finally noticed and sent in the bailiffs to get what was owed in 901 M41. The tithe fleet was blown out of the sky, though the details of this are unknown, with Huron claiming the ships were threatening him, and thus he had every right to destroy them. If only they'd sent an Inquisition ship alongside the Mechanicus and Co. The traders of the Carthago sector, who had been the middlemen for the Astral Claws and who had sent ships in the tithe fleet, were not pleased, and lost 2 more fleets in suspicious circumstances trying to punish Huron. It was blamed on an increased number of pirates in the area, but was likely the Astral Claws. The Tyrant of Badab then finally revealed his hand, calling together the other chapters in the Maelstrom Warders, the Lamenters, and the Mantis Warriors. He put forth a decree of just secession, claiming the entire Maelstrom zone as his and the Warders' domain, free from the ties of nearby sectors like Carthago, while still doing the Emperor's work in patrolling the Maelstrom and protecting the nearby systems from any who threatened the Imperium. Perhaps unsurprisingly given its nature and mindset, the Imperium did not take kindly to Huron's secession, even if he still claimed that he fought in the Emperor's name. It took a lot of begging from the Carthagan traders to get anywhere, but eventually the Firehawks chapter came to investigate in 904 M41. They were boarded by the Mantis Warriors when they refused to state their intentions in what was Mantis Warrior territory, and the firefight that ensued was the first true battle of what would become known as the Badab War. Over the next 2 years, the Firehawks and later the Marines Errant would do their best to protect shipping lanes and destroy the secessionists, but were outnumbered initially by 3 chapters to 2, and then 4 to 1, as the Marines Errant were forced to retreat, and the Executioners chapter joined Huron in honour of a debt to the Astral Claws. The High Lords of Terror, eventually, paid attention, and dispatched elements of 4 more chapters, including the Salamanders, to lead a true crusade to put down the Tyrant of Badab. In total, 13 chapters will be committed to the Badab War in some strength or another by the Imperium, with at least 73 separate battle companies involved, excluding the unknown numbers from the Salamanders and Carcharodons, and the full might of one Imperial battle fleet and the reserves of another would also be brought in. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them, the 4 secessionist chapters and battle fleet Maelstrom held strong for the best part of a decade, but, gradually, the war turned in the Imperium's favour. Well, I say 4 chapters, but in truth there was a secret ploy from Huron at work. He had used the withheld gene seed to rebuild the lost/destroyed Tiger Claws chapter, adding them to the Astral Claws ranks to hide this fact, and trying to explain why the chapter never seemed to lose strength despite heavy losses. Eventually though, the Astral Claws stood practically alone as Badab Primaris was invaded. They were cut off from their Mechanicus allies, the Mantis Warriors and Lamenters were both cut off and forced to surrender, and the Executioners were granted mercy and safe passage by the Salamanders to repay a debt. But the Astral Claws and the now revealed Tiger Claws fought until the end without surrender. The Fall of Badab, as the invasion is known, was a massive 2-day-ish battle that committed the entire Star Phantoms chapter along with elements of 4 others. A somewhat unconventional opening came from the Carcharodons as they infiltrated and destroyed the reactors powering the cities and defences, and the Star Phantoms led the charge to the Palace of Thorns, Huron's stronghold. The battle was brief, but the Loyalists did win out and forced the surviving Astral Claws to flee. Huron's actions during the battle are reported as either being everywhere at once on the front lines or just sitting for his throne room, but none know for sure, and I could hardly go and grab the Tyrant for an interview now, could I? Regardless, at the end of the invasion he fought and killed the Star Phantom's 9th Captain Androcles, but suffered horrific injuries from the dying captain's combi melter as he stupidly stood over his supposedly dead body to gloat. It wasn't actually the gun that did the damage, it was the explosion of Huron's lightning claw caused by the gun, which meant Huron lost his right arm, among other things. The surviving Astral Claws, around 200 by this point, recovered their lord's body and fled on a single vessel commanded by Master of the Forge Armenius Valthex, heading into the Maelstrom. Their former allies were somehow shown mercy and sent on a penitent crusade to atone for their betrayals, but are now all at either critical levels of numbers for various reasons, or simply missing. The Imperium does seize homeworlds so that they could not recruit, at least in the case of the Mantis Warriors. The Badab sector is now under the control of the remaining Star Phantoms, and Badab Primaris was wreathed in toxic fallout that exterminated the entire population as a result of the Karkaradin's actions. As for Huron, he would go on to heal from his injuries and rebrand himself as Huron Blackheart, the Blood Reaver, whilst the Astral Claws would become the Red Corsairs. Whilst Huron slept, still mortally wounded from the battle in the Palace of Thorns, his mind wandered whilst the apothecaries tended to his mortal form. It is said that his wayward soul made contact with, or was found by, the gods of chaos, and it made a deal with the ruinous powers, trading servitude for survival. This, along with the ministrations of Master of the Forge Valthex and Apothecary Lord Garrion, among others, allowed the Tyrant to recover from his injuries with the aid of some serious bionics. They pretty much had to rebuild his body from nothing, including his entire right arm. As he recovered, it appears that the Chaos Gods appeared to reward Huron with the Hamadria, a strange warp creature that became more substantial as the Tyrant approached health again. Initially, it was bound to the Maelstrom, as it relied on the warp for power and could not survive outside of it, but after some shenanigans that involved a sorcerer's soul, it became possible for the Hamadria, and in turn Huron, to venture into real space. The creature gives Huron a measure of psychic power, similar to the familiars that other psychers use to boost their powers, but starting from nothing. The powers Huron can use are unpredictable, seemingly never the same powers or even the same discipline, and on occasion it has been known for the creature to drain psychic energy, like the null rods used by the Order Malleus. As concerns conventional weapons, Huron wields a mighty power axe alongside the Tyrant's Claw, a unique power fist with a heavy flamer at the centre, built into it that makes it look like he shoots fire out of his hands, which he kind of does, though by conventional means as opposed to magical ones. The claw was made to replace the right arm that Huron had lost. I suppose he didn't want another lightning claw after the last one blew up, and each talon, finger, claw, whatever you want to call it, was crafted from the power armour of enemy loyalist Astartes. The Astral Claws, as we know, would become the Red Corsairs, a piratical warband who operate from the Maelstrom. They settled on a planet that they christened New Badab, which now bristles with defences and will often play host to alien mercenaries. Those champions and leaders seeking the favour of Blackheart will compete in the Skull Harvest, a tournament run by Huron in New Badab that will grant the victor the resources of their defeated foes, along with some Red Corsair support. But be warned, for the Skull Harvest will result in the death of all save said victor, and if you lose, your skull will be added to Huron's throne. The Red Corsairs were only around 200 strong after the Badab War, and were now without the resources to rebuild their numbers following the loss of their home. However, they have recruited many other traitor marines into their ranks, and others have joined them willingly, to the point that the Red Corsairs are now supposedly around the strength of an Astartes legion before the Horus Heresy, presumably counting for their human cultists, as otherwise it would give them 100,000 plus Astartes within the warband, at least on average. Once, Lord Huron and the Astral Claws would defend the Maelstrom zone from pirates who sought to plunder and slaughter. Now, the power-armoured boot is squarely on the other foot, as the Red Corsairs have become what they once fought to destroy. Sworn to chaos by Huron's dark bargain, they will act as pirates for the most part, but will also raid and pillage shipping lanes or worlds around the Maelstrom. Not for resources, nor captives, but just for the sheer heck of it. The surviving Astral Claws will probably also find a perverse pleasure in destroying what they once defended, I assume. Their fleet would appear to be ragtag, for the ships are drawn from all sorts of places. After all, it is said that only one Astral Claw ship got away from Badab Primaris, but they are an extremely powerful and adaptable force. Armies can be as small as a single battle barge, loaded with Astartes that are perhaps as skilled as any in the art of boarding actions, or large fleets swarming with marines, cultists, and ships of all sizes. The vessels in the fleet are drawn from all over. The renegades who join up to the Red Corsairs will bring whatever vessels they have, and Huron's boys have made off with / salvaged more than a few ships. It is said that the vessel used as Huron's flagship, the battle barge Spectre of Ruin, was a word-bearer ship salvaged from the edge of the Maelstrom, lost assumedly during the Horus Heresy. And at least one Night Lord ship is present too, possibly from before but also around the time of Talos Valcoran. But arguably, Huron's greatest prize is the strike cruiser, the Wolf of Fenris. The Red Corsairs attacked the Space Wolves and the Flamehawks chapters in the Parenxis sector, crippling the Wolf of Fenris but allowing all others to flee, assumedly so their boarding action against the Wolf wouldn't be disrupted, even though more ships would always be welcome. They then seized the engine room of the strike cruiser to prevent a self-destruct and took the rest of the ship, with Huron personally killing the captain with the Tyrant's claw. Some Space Wolves would actually renounce their loyalty to the Imperium and were absorbed into the renegade army, giving command of the Wolf of Fenris for their loyalty. Don't tell the Space Wolves. The Red Corsairs have been involved in a wide variety of campaigns against the Imperium since their flight into the Maelstrom. They have met with mixed results, as they have been able to annihilate planets or lose all of their forces over the last 90 years or so. For example, the Imperial battle fleet Aquinas was all but wiped out in the Red Corsair raid at the Battle of Aldarion, and the Marines Errant were seemingly punished for their role in the Badab War as the renegades made off with almost their entire gene seed stock, stolen from their fortress monastery, Villamus. However, the Adeptus Sororitas were able to crush a Red Corsair invasion of San Lior, the planet that was the original home of the Daughters of the Emperor, the group that would become the Sororitas. The Silver Skulls, an Astartes chapter guided by the Prognosticators, librarians who also function as seers for some reason, were also able to destroy a Corsair fleet and then hunt the remnants down in retaliation for the theft of the Wolf of Fenris. Huron has not seemingly brushed with death again since Badab, but he was believed to have been killed at one point by the Grey Knight's Grandmaster Mordrak. Having been the sole survivor of a Red Corsair raid on the fortress world Mortagne, Mordrak and his paladin guard caught up to Huron when he launched a raid on the shipyards of Bacca, the naval base for all of Segmentum Tempestus that built and dispatched huge numbers of ships. The Grey Knights boarded Huron's flagship and were supposedly backed up by the ghosts of Mortagne as they hunted for Blackheart. Mordrak struck down Huron, but it turned out to be a demonic doppelganger as opposed to the Tyrant. The Grey Knights withdrew as the Red Corsairs did, with neither side claiming the prize or prizes they sought. In more recent times, the Red Corsairs have laid siege to several systems, including that of Chagoris, home of the White Scars chapter. The raids have actually pulled the Sons of Jagtai Khan away from their commitments to Armageddon and Agralan, such as the risk posed by Huron Blackheart and his forces. As for whether the Red Corsairs have forced any Xenos, I actually couldn't find any, which was weird. Maybe they just haven't documented them all that well. Time will tell, though, whether the White Scars will suffer the fate of the Marines Errant, or whether the Khan's sons will succeed where the Grey Knights failed, in taking the head of the Tyrant of Badab. So ends the tale of Huron Blackheart and the Red Corsairs. The Astral Claws served with honour for the best part of 6 millennia, winning many commendations along the way, but now they are the core of one of the most infamous renegade warbands of the 41st millennium. Striking from the Maelstrom with brutal efficiency, the Red Corsairs are a scourge on the Imperium, and were his name still in the records, Huron Blackheart would be one of the most reviled of traitors. Now then, it is time for us to leave the Badab sector and head to our next Legion world. As I mentioned earlier, I had planned to visit the Primogenitors for the Astral Claws, but since we don't know that, I'll take a best guess based on what we know about them. So, factoring in the number of successes each Legion had, looking at any naming conventions... Okay, decision made. This may be my hardest infiltration mission yet. Ladies and gentlemen, we're off to Ultramar. I hope you can join me there for the next part of Legions, our 40k Stories mini-series. Thank you all for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.